Hello friends, my name is Steve Guttenberg and I am the audiophiliac, and today's show is, I always say this, it's a very special episode. Today is the most special episode of all time.
The crowning achievement.
It is the crowning achievement of this show because I'm going to interview, as Bill Maher used to say, my old boss, Andrew Singer, here at Sound by Singer in New York City. And we met 44 years ago when you started. And you were working out of your parents' living room on 68th Street. And, meeting Andrew Singer then, and I had shopped in dozens of stores before I ever got to Sound by Singer. There was something really special about Andy Singer.
Wow.
And this was before he was, in quotes, Andrew Singer. And we connected, and we're still friends all these years later, but that initial connection was so strong.
Yeah.
And
huge.
I started working, I was hanging out with you, and I was working with you. And in those really early years, we would, after the store closed, we would a lot of times have dinner.
Yep.
And we were young, so we would go out to clubs and hear music and hang out. And I remember one time...
And try to pick up girls.
That
Let's
too.
not forget that part.
Oh yeah, that was the best part.
That was the best part.
Because they were so attracted to men who were interested in audio. It was,
we were just,
slam dunk.
We were like football players.
Yeah.
But you had this gorgeous little girlfriend at that time. So I really think...
Oh, that was it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
see.
you had this great girlfriend.
Yes, Sam.
I just had, a revolving door at that point.
Okay. So anyway, it was fun. I remember one time we went to see, there was a thing in a club, it was called 24 Hours of Stand-Up.
Yes.
Remember this night?
I do remember that.
I think we ate at the club or something, but we were there for 4 or 5 or 6 hours, and the comics were only on for like 10 minutes at a time. So every hour there were like 5 or 6 different comics.
Right.
And it was amazing.
It was amazing. It was just the most fun.
We
did a lot of fun things.
And we went to see Warren Zevon, remember?
We did.
You were really into Warren Zevon.
I loved Warren Zevon. I still like Warren Zevon.
And it was
even
at the
to this
Beacon
day,
Theater, I think, probably.
Yes, that's right.
So
we did a lot of
we
stuff
had a
together.
lot of fun.
Yeah,
in
I
the
mean, we
early
used to
days.
go on road trips.
Yeah, go to CES.
Yeah.
That was the early time, the first couple of times we went to CES together.
We all went together. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was great.
It was amazing.
And CES was back then the audio portion of CES, especially in Chicago.
Yeah.
It was a wild place. I mean, really, the manufacturers,
Sex,
the
drugs, and
importers.
rock and roll.
Exactly, that's what it was: sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
And what was that in the Vegas one with the low-rise buildings with the pools? What was that one?
I can't remember. It was. I don't
I'm
remember the name of it.
mixing them up, but I think we were the year like when Martin Logan launched, and we went to hear the very first Martin Logan speakers.
Yeah.
And we had
a great time.
And the other thing we had fun was with the business, the designers and the owners of the company, most notably Peter Snell.
Yeah, we would definitely, when we hung out with Peter, and he had a manager, a business manager named David Wickman. And David Wickman was a complete wild man. And he would make Peter a little bit wild. And we'd go out and get drunk and have a really good time. We just had a wonderful time with some of these people. Because back then, some of them were so interesting. I don't think that that's the case anymore. It's very hard
we're
to...
older, and that's a different
You mean, in other words, we don't appreciate interesting anymore?
No, it's different.
Or maybe we appreciate interesting and understand that maybe the people we thought were interesting weren't. But that's not the case.
They were fun,
that's not the case with Peter. Peter was always great. Then we would go to dinner with people like Dan, and I know you know which Dan.
Yeah.
And he would, get angry and then leave the table and stuff like that. So these people were just completely nuts. But they were fun. It was just fun.
Yeah, it was fun, and it was exciting because it was new. It felt new. What was happening in high-end audio in the late 70s through the 80s, there was an energy to the industry and to the people buying it and the people writing about it. Everybody.
Because it was new. It was
a wave.
It was different. It was here now. It was people coming in. I mean, it's interesting. Some of the people that were doing it, how many of them had come from other walks of life?
Yeah.
And discovered their audio, audio gene.
Yeah, but it was an amazing time. So you picked exactly
the right moment
time
in history
to jump in.
I did.
You did. I mean,
I did.
If you had done it 5 years earlier, it would have been too soon.
It would have been too soon. 5 years later, it would have been too late.
Been one of many. So it couldn't have been better.
Steve, you and I were unique. We're unique.
we're unique. We're survivors. We've seen the arc,
We've seen
and we're still here,
and we've still
and
done
we're
it. We're
still
still
doing our
doing it.
thing.
We're
Yeah.
still doing it.
Yeah. So it all worked out.
It did.
And I was going to say, who could have seen it coming? Actually, if we would have then thought about what 2022 would have been like, we would probably have predicted something like this.
I think that's probably true. There was never a moment where I said to myself, I don't want to do this. There was a moment where I said, I can't afford the rent at this huge store, and I had to close down a big operation and then reopen it in this location.
Right.
But there was never a moment where I said, I don't like this anymore and I don't like doing it. I didn't like some of the things. And you asked me a question earlier about which location was my favorite.
Yeah.
If you
So there's
recall.
4. Right.
There's 4. There was the first one in my mother's living room.
Right.
The second one was on Lexington Avenue on the second floor.
Upstairs.
The third was on 33rd Street. Oh, there's 5.
5, right.
Yeah. The fourth was 16th Street, which was the famous one.
The one that lasted the longest.
The one that lasted
or
the
is this
longest. No, it's about the same.
Okay.
And then there's here.
And with a name, I never asked you this before. The name Sound by Singer.
Where did I get that from?
It's a great name.
Yeah, where did I get
It
that
certainly
from?
worked. Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm gonna tell you the truth.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm gonna tell anybody the truth.
Okay.
So there was a company called Audio by Zimmet
Okay.
out in Long Island, and in fact, Josh Cohen was working there back then. And I thought about Starstruck Audio, Big Shot Audio, Best Sound Audio, Opus 17 Audio, all these like fanciful names. And I said, no, this is going to be Sound by Singer. It's alliterative, and it's the only thing I can really say with any truth and honesty.
Wow.
So
I
that's
mean,
how it came.
It works. Apparently, you're still here. But what was we're gonna go through the whole story here, but just want to take a little detour and say, what was the most fun? I mean,
Oh,
with all
it's
these
still the
toys,
most fun.
and it's still the most fun.
So the most fun was being able to play with things that I might want for myself, because since day one, I've been my own best customer. And I put it to you that anybody in this business who isn't their own best customer is a fraud.
Wow. Well, that's strong. You see, that makes me think that you are an audiophile. And I would say that most of the people that I know in the business, certainly in retail, are not audiophiles. They don't say, I am an audiophile.
So
if I ask them, they'll say no.
So do I want to have the best sounding equipment in my house at all times? 100%. So if that makes me an audiophile, I'm an audiophile. I don't agree with your definition of audiophile,
Right.
but that's fine.
That's
then
fine.
I'm an audiophile. I'm fine with that.
You care about the sound of music and you listen to it.
No, I'm crazy about it.
All right,
I'm
well,
nuts.
then
I mean, you can ask our mutual friend, the great setup artist, turntable setup artist, Mike Trey. I can actually like become apoplectic about, point 0.1 gram of weight on my tone arm and what it does to the sound. No, that the most fun is being involved in the equipment. And the second most fun, which is really the thing that I think made my business as successful as it's been, is I love getting people exposed to something that they've never heard before. I love that look on their face. It's a holy
moly.
Holy moly. What is that? Nothing ever sounded like that to me. And when I get that, it's just a joy. It's a joy. It's like, it's like teaching your kid how to read.
Wow.
It's that feeling you have when you've enlightened somebody. It's like a real blessing.
Yeah, because, since I worked here for many years,
Yeah.
when I did that, and a lot of people would always preface it by saying, I'm not sure I can hear the difference. Or they say, I can hear the difference. Why are we doing this demo? I'd say, well, let's just do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And when they heard it and got it, they
Yeah.
were excited, like, oh, yeah, there is a difference.
Well, first of all, it validated
Right.
them.
Right.
Made them
right.
feel, well, you know what, I'm not a moron. But I would say to people, when they would say I can't hear the difference, I would say, I'm going to prove to you that you can. Close your eyes. And I would take out my keys. and I would jingle the keys, and I would say, "Can you tell me what that is?" She goes, "Yeah, it's the sound of keys." And I said, "How do you know? How do you know that's the sound of keys?
Mm.
If you can't tell the difference between one note and another, how do you know that's the sound of keys?" So I put it to you that everybody can tell the difference. It's with, with the possible, you know, with the possible exclusion of people who are quite literally deaf, everybody can tell the difference. It's just, and part of it is being able to accept that you're hearing a difference
Mm.
and being open to that. And that's something can take a while with customers.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, but when they get it, it's a really big deal.
That's huge.
Especially when they hear music that is familiar to them and they've been listening to it for decades or their whole life and they hear it a new way.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So we're talking here near 45 years, Steve. You can imagine.
Yes.
I would guess I've heard people express that shock or amazement. I don't know how many hundreds of times have I heard them do that.
Yeah.
And it's always the same, and it's always different. That's the fascinating thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because selling audio is kind of like being a shrink, right? You got to get into their head. You got to like put them on the couch and say, what do you want? What are you hearing? You know,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely true. And at least in part, that's because people are really wary of someone who wants to sell them a piece of audio gear.
Yeah, that's true. They're
So,
on guard.
I guess the point I'm making is that it's really important for people to be open to the capability, to the ability of learning something, and also that they don't feel they need to do it all on their own.
Yes,
And that it's the most important thing for me was always establishing enough degree of trust both in my musical acumen and my integrity for people to at least accept recommendations as a starting point. Yeah, well, one of the things I've always tried to do is not beat around the bush. So I really, when I go into a store and I start hearing salesmen speak, my eyes start to glaze over personally.
Right.
I get a headache.
They're just going through the motions.
It's just going through the motions. So I don't want to do that with people, and I don't want to, I don't want to do the thing with, well, yeah, that's very, very good. Wow, yeah, that $300 receiver you have is excellent. I don't want to do that nonsense. I want to tell people the truth. And some people find candor refreshing, and some people find it absolutely unacceptable and insulting. So my approach has always been, yeah, okay, that's an interesting idea, but here's not why it's not going to work. Here's what will work. Why don't you have a listen? Again, it really depends on the individual. Lots of people like being, and that's why I had salesmen. I had salesmen who would shine somebody's shoes in order to make a sale.
I know who you mean.
And
too.
you know who I mean,
Yeah.
too. That was fine with me. If people wanted that, I didn't care. But personally, at least, my relationship with my customers and the best customers I have, some of which, and this is going to sound insane, I've never met.
Oh, right.
Because, especially because of the pandemic, some of whom, I've never seen a picture of. But, when they have a question, I'm the person they call. And I have to tell you, that's incredibly gratifying.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure the comments under this video are going to be intense because
all over the map.
You've been around a long time.
People love me. People hate me.
Yeah, but the fact is that you're still here.
I am.
That's saying something.
That is saying something.
That is saying a lot.
That is saying something.
And it makes me think that when you started, 1978, we were 44 years younger than we are now.
We were.
And so were our customers.
Because
they weren't 60 and 70-year-old men like they are now, tend to be older. And the people who were writing about it, John Atkins and Jonathan Scott, they were all 42 years younger. the manufacturers, like Dan D'Agostino, was 42 years younger.
Everybody was 42.
Was younger. It wasn't an industry of old people. It's become.
But there are lots of young people
There
in
are.
it now.
I'm just saying.
The question is, and there are a lot of young people manufacturing stuff too.
Right.
When we were operating early on, the average customer who came in was a professional lawyer, a doctor, accountant. There wasn't, in 1978 at least, there wasn't this huge Wall Street market where people were, 12 years old and making $500,000 for 2 months' work. So yeah, it's changed a lot.
So and of course, I think part of the art of running an audio store is the lines that you choose. There's lots of them out there. Which ones are the ones that you picked? And the ones that you picked early on, like Snell and Lynn, and Acoustat, well, that was an early, but Spender, of all the things out there, and more than short, it must have felt kind of like, am I picking the right ones? It's like a customer, but a much bigger investment for you than the customer. So when you take on a line, you should explain to people, it's not like, oh, I'm going to take it. You have to basically have a large opening order, of some kind of significant opening order to get it. So you're putting your money where your mouth is.
Right. I mean, everybody thinks we get these things for free, that the manufacturers give them to us and put it on the shelves. And everybody thinks that we spend 10% of the cost for the goods. If customers actually knew what audio equipment cost the dealer, they'd have a whole lot more sanguine attitude towards dealers. I mean, if you want to make money, you really want to make money, you don't want to go in the audio business. That's not why you do it. You do it because you like it. And if you don't like it, you're going to hate it really quickly.
But the other thing about the people that start the companies that you eventually have relationships with is that their passion for making something great.
Their passion is very, very important. And, one of the things that you got to be careful of is over the years, I've had many people come to me with their ideas of products and play them for me. And I would say the vast majority of them were terrible.
That's subtle.
Well, no, they were. And they didn't, and the proof is in the pudding, they don't exist anymore. And there were all sorts of stories that are associated with why people bought things. One of the big problems, of course, was that people started to rely too much on reviews.
My people.
Well, no, it's not that they shouldn't rely on them, but they really need to understand that the person writing the review is not a guarantor of their satisfaction, that the person selling them the amplifier or the preamp or the CD player is.
Well, yeah. I think ultimately, I used to go through this all the time with customers. I said, my credibility in presenting something to you is I have something to lose and gain by doing this. But the writer of the review, and I'm saying this as a reviewer now, doesn't, right?
Right, doesn't.
What's the worst that can happen if the reviewer gives you bad information? You go, oh, screw that guy, I'm not going to read him anymore.
Right,
I'm not gonna.
exactly.
That's the worst, and they're going to mostly be completely unaware of that. But if I don't make sales because you bought a product that you don't like because I said it was good, I lose out, the store loses out. That's a much bigger thing.
The other major issue is you get a piece, you listen to it, it sounds good. That's all you know.
Right.
You don't know how reliable it is. You don't know how well it's built. You don't know any of the things that somebody who wants to keep it for years would need to know. But you know who does know those things?
Who?
The dealer. The dealer knows those things. And the dealer doesn't want to sell you. And I'm doing this as a general statement. No dealers want to sell you something that's going to come back. So almost by definition, you can say the dealers want to sell you something that's reliable and which they can have some trust in. Are there scrupulous people who would sell you the bricks off the floor and tell you it's a magic potion to make your system sound good? Yes, there are, but they're few and far between.
What about on the lower price scale, NAD? Because you were really early into NAD. That was one of the earliest lines.
The early NAD stuff was just remarkable, especially of obviously the 3020. It was just an incredible basically an at-Tolman preamplifier with a 25 watt per channel amplifier that just didn't seem to ever clip.
It sounded. I mean,
it was like
$175.
Yeah, it was the crazy cheapest, best thing out there. It was crazy. Yeah, and there's nothing like that in the world right now. It was unique.
Right.
It was a unique product, but the problem was the original NAD stuff. When we first got NAD, there was the original stuff which we got, which was not great.
Before the 3020.
Before the 3020.
You were in even before the 3020.
Right. So then the 3020 came out, and that was great. And then they started making receivers based on it, which really weren't entirely based on it. But, they were okay. So NAD certainly filled its position as the poor man's high-end audio equipment for many years. But just like every company that does that, they left that mark and moved upstream because you can't make enough money doing that.
Right.
And as they moved upstream, I think they lost their focus.
Mm-hmm. What about Lynn? I mean, that was huge for you. Lynn turntables and not Lynn electronics, just Lynn turntable arm cartridge.
Lynn is I really curse Lynn because Lynn got me on my personal quest for the best vinyl playback in the world. And that has been both a joy and a real frustration because, you can always make it better. So when I say by cursing Lynn had this principle that it all started at the source, and if you couldn't get it off the record, it wasn't worth putting it into the preamp and the amplifier and the speakers. It just wasn't going to sound good. And they were right. They were 100% accurate. And so I not only bought that whole concept intellectually as well as emotionally.
The hierarchy of the system.
The hierarchy of the system.
Turntable's most important,
Tone
then
arm,
the arm, cartridge,
phonostage, preamp, amplifier, last speakers.
I'm pretty sure I was the first employee / salesman. But I've been here or knew a lot of the people that worked here over the course of the history of the store.
Yeah.
But some of them are real standouts, like the other Andy that worked here, and of course Mike. Yeah, well, a lot of them. Strong personalities, interesting people, but the balance of them, I think that's, especially looking back over the arc of different types of, personalities that gravitated towards certain customers or customers gravitated towards them. How did you pick so many good ones? That's what I'm saying.
I don't know. I think they picked me.
Oh, okay.
For the most part. Well, no. I mean, that's not entirely accurate. So there were a lot of people applying for jobs very early on, and I was not hiring people very easily. But when I saw somebody that really seemed to have both passion and who could hook up wires, because
right,
you really had to be able to do that. You had to set up your own systems. I would give them a chance, but as you probably remember, a lot of people came and went.
Of course, those that I remember.
Right, they came and went, and some of them came and went so quickly, I don't even remember their name.
And you remember Eggy, the stock guy.
The happiest stock guy in the history of the world.
He was always happy.
This African American kid, he was about 18 or 19 when we first hired him, something like that, who was as strong as a bull and as sweet as a human being could be and as reliable as anybody in the whole world. He was just terrific. And I never knew what his first name was because he kept on saying, "Just call me Eggy." And so I did. We all called him Eggy. He was great. He was great. I loved him.
He walked into a room, you felt better kind of guy.
Yeah, he was the kind of guy that, he always had a smile on his face, and the smile was genuine. He was not devious, of course,
And Rich Falter, who has passed since recently, a couple of years ago, actually.
He was a really, really dynamic salesman.
Another crazy Eddie,
Another crazy Eddie guy who knew a lot about custom install and was very useful and helpful, early on. Later on, I don't think that was when he went to work for Rep. I don't think he was quite as happy. But when he was working for us, he was doing very nicely.
Yeah.
And he was an interesting guy.
He had a lot of energy.
A lot of energy. Very sarcastic, but he was funny too.
So then we should talk about customers. And there's one guy, and I don't remember his name, but I think you'll know who I'm talking about. He was a pastry chef, and he used to bring
I
in...
loved him. He was great.
He was amazing because he would bring in these amazing things, and we would just like dive in.
Right. He was a pastry chef for like a major French restaurant.
Yeah.
I don't remember his name. I could see his face.
Yeah.
And I know what he bought. He bought a
Oh, you did?
He bought a Koustats,
Uh-huh.
and he bought a Koustat TNT amp, audio research preamp. So, you know, as a pastry chef, he made a good living. And when he would come by, you know, he worked in a really high-end establishment. So it was the kind of place was they would cook whatever they made, or they would make a dessert. And if it wasn't eaten that night, it was thrown out, or he took them with it. So he had made this one dessert, which they didn't have enough of, and he was bringing it home with him. And he stopped by the store, and I went, boy, does that look good? He goes, keep it. And I went, what? He said, keep it. I make these every day, so, you know, I don't need another one. And that was great. That was great. It was one of those, and we all sat down and dug into this, some sort of cream pie. I can't remember what, but I remember it was phenomenal. Was it a banana cream pie? Something like that.
Yeah.
But he was a cool guy.
He was nice.
Yeah, it was great.
And
God, what was his name?
remember my customer,
Which one?
Katsuyuki.
There's a special guy.
He was so amazing.
Tanaka,
Tall.
right?
Yeah, Katsuyuki Tanaka.
Was he the guy who always brought in the pretty girls with him?
Yes, he had lots of girlfriends. He was Japanese, and his girlfriends were tall Japanese models.
They were gorgeous.
And my memory was that he would buy audio systems for them. Expensive ones, too.
He was buying it for them? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
he was buying for them as presents, $10,000 systems. And I said to him, why do you do this? Because I knew that he wasn't around any of them for longer than a few months or so. And he said, well, when I go to their apartment, I want to have something to listen to. I said, well, okay, that makes sense.
I guess he had a lot of money.
He had a lot of money.
Very strange guy.
And
He also had no front teeth. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't remember.
Poor guy.
But he did okay.
He did.
He did just fine.